hard, but the best thing we could ever do is bring your brokenness and I'll bring mine. 'Cause love can heal what hurt divides, and mercy's waiting on the other side. If we're honest, if we're honest, if we're honest.
Hello, Show students and families. It's Pastor Billy, and welcome to another week once again digitally. Hopefully all this soon will be coming to an end. And right now, like I announced last week, our projected date is July the 8th, but keep in mind that may change. Numbers have gone up lately in North Carolina, especially in Alamance County. I believe the last time we looked, Alamance County is one of the leading places of COVID-19. So let's just keep that in mind, that's our projected return date is July the 8th, but that could change. And we'll keep you guys posted as much as we know, all right? And so, again, thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and grab them. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 37. We're going to continue our series. If you remember last week, we started a series entitled What to Do when you don't know what to do. There's some situations that's going to arise in your life that you don't really know what to do and how to handle it. And so what we're going to do tonight is continue that series. And just while you're still turning to Genesis chapter 37, I want to give you a little background of what we talked about last week. If you will remember, last week we noticed that Joseph was Jacob's favorite. He had brothers, but he was the favorite son. And we discussed what happens when there's drama within your family. What do you do as a student? What do you do as a parent when there is drama within your family? And what we looked at is you got to understand that you get the way things affect you. You get the way people treat you and how that affects you emotionally and how that affects you, period. But we fail to realize at times our actions and how it affects our family. And so our challenge was understand that your actions does affect other people. Your words, the way that you do things, the way that you say things, all these things matter, and it does affect your family and it does affect others. And so be careful in those things. Well, this week what we're going to look at is what happens when you allow anger and envy to continue to arise in your heart. What happens to you and what happens to your family? What's the effect of those things? Because if you remember, and if you would go back to Genesis chapter 37, verse 4, what you're going to realize is that Joseph's brothers hated him. They literally hated the man. And if you would go then back to verse 11, you're going to find out that hatred turned into envy. And what we're going to do tonight is look at the results of hatred and envy. So look down with me in verse 18. I'll go back in just a minute to verses 12 through 17. But let's pick up in verse 18 and let's read just a little bit, and then we'll go in with our lesson. Verse 18 says this, "And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh," or the man that knows all the dreams comes. Here he is. "Come now, therefore, and let us slay him, and cast into some pit, and we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." And Reuben, which in a minute you're going to find out is the oldest brother, and Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, Let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into his pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him of their hands, to deliver him to his father again. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his coat of many colors that was on him. And they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread. And they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead, and with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brothers, What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother in our flesh, and his brethren were content. So tonight, if you're taking notes, it'll be here on the screen in just a minute. We're going to look at two things that happens when you hold hatred and envy within your heart. So if you choose not to, in a way, kind of look within your own heart and determine how your actions affect other people, and you hold on to the hatred, envy, some jealousy with your family, with others, these are the two things that can happen. Okay, that can happen. One is this: your anger and your envy can lead you to violence. It can lead you to violence. Notice that within verse 18, what you're going to find is that Joseph is on his way to his brothers. But you might say, why? Well, that's why we go back up to verses 12 through 17. And what we're going to notice is that the brothers are watching a flock. They're watching whether it's a flock of sheep, and they're watching the animals, but they carry the animals from one spot to another, which is about 50 miles away. And what happens is Jacob is going to send Joseph to go, in a sense, spy on his brothers to report back to him what they're doing. And when Joseph gets to the place they are, he realizes that they're gone. So a messenger comes, tells him where the brothers went, and then he goes after the brothers. But notice what violence leads you to do. Violence starts with conspiracy. Notice in verse 18 it says, "And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him." So if you notice, your violence will start with conspiracy. It will start with some form of conspiracy. Notice the brothers didn't know why Joseph was coming. They didn't know that the father had sent Joseph. All they know is they saw Joseph, and that hatred and envy within their heart begin to conspire within their minds what to do with Joseph. Now, we don't know why these men left 50 miles away from their spot. We don't know what. I mean, it could be that they were already conspiring within their hearts to do something to Joseph. We don't know. But all we know is that they had a conspiracy. They were conspiring within their hearts to do something to their younger brother. You might say, why are they hating him, right? Why are they envious of him? Remember, he's the father's favorite. And then he comes with two dreams, and he says that you're all going to bow down to me one day, and all these things. And so the hatred and envy begin to stir, which is going to lead to violence, which started with a conspiracy. It starts with a conspiracy. Now, notice that this conspiracy led to, in a sense, apathy. Follow along. It says that the brothers conspired within their heart. Reuben is going to speak up, which in a minute we'll learn that we know that he's the oldest. According to 1 Chronicles chapter 5, verse 1, he is the oldest brother. And he is the one that actually gets the place taken by Joseph. So if you realize, go back last week, Joseph received the coat of many colors, which was meant for the oldest son. So Reuben, the oldest son, is actually going to stand up for Joseph and say, let's not kill Joseph, let's not slay him, rather let's just throw him in a pit. Right? Well, there's no water, no food, let's just throw him in there, let him sit in there, and we then will sit around and have a meal. Notice it. It says this, that in verse 23, "And it came to pass when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him, and they took him and cast him in a pit where it was empty and no water in it. And they sat down," in verse 25, "to eat bread." Now, how cold do you have to be to your brother that you can abuse him, you can strip him of the coat that was given to him by the father, throw him in a pit with nothing, and you as brothers sit around and, in a sense, have a meal. You sit there while your brother is suffering, and you eat like nothing is wrong. Well, the reason they can do that is because apathy has set in. In other words, they don't care anymore. That hatred and that envy within their heart has stirred up so much that he was apathetic. They were apathetic towards Joseph's emotions or feelings. Now let me say this. If you have zero conscience for someone who's suffering, for someone who's hurting, for someone who's whatever they're going through, you feel nothing about that. You feel nothing towards them. Something bad happens to that person or something, you feel nothing towards them, no sympathy or empathy at all. It's probably because you're apathetic, because in your mind you have conspired to turn against them because you're angry and you want violence to happen. And in the same manner, that's exactly what's happening here, is that these brothers have become so apathetic in their mind because they've conspired within their mind because they have hatred and envy within their heart. And with that, they choose violence over love. And when you become that, when you become so hatred and envious of another person, it will lead to violence. It starts with a conspiracy, ends with apathy. And what you're going to find is that with apathy, with conspiracy, with this sense of violence comes deception. Comes deception. Continue reading with me in verse 26. It says, And Judah said unto his brethren, What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh, and his brethren were content. Then there passed by Midianites, merchantmen, that drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. And Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. And as we returned to his brethren, he said, This child is not, and I, whither shall I go? So the first deception, I want you to look at this. The first deception was found within the violence. Right? You have the brothers who turn against brother. They then take Joseph, they strip him of the gift given to his father, throw him in a pit, become apathetic, have a meal while his brother is suffering in the pit with no water, nothing, no food or anything. And then they begin to deceive him. Not only do they deceive Joseph, they deceive Reuben. Well, we're going to notice that Reuben has left. Maybe that was to conspire to how to get Joseph out of the pit to rescue him. Maybe it was something going on with the flock and he had to go take care of it. Regardless, Reuben leaves. The one who saves Joseph's life to begin with leaves. The brothers then deceive not only Joseph, but they deceive Reuben. Because what you're going to notice about deception is deception always leads to other deceptions. I remember growing up, my father said, son, you have to if you're going to become a liar, that means you have to, once you tell one lie, you have to tell another lie to cover up that lie. Basically, what he was saying was, if you want to be a deceiver, deception always leads to more deception. Lies always lead to more lies. So they lie in a sense to Joseph. They kind of in a sense welcome him and then they just attack him, throw him into the pit. Then they deceive Reuben by saying, we're not going to hurt him, we're not going to touch him. And they end up selling him. They end up selling the guy. And they end up giving him to another group of people. They end up deceiving Joseph again. So Reuben shows back up and says, where is Joseph? What are you going to do with me now? Right? You've deceived him. How else are you going to deceive me? And then they become, like, in a sense, more conspiracy. Notice in verse 31, and they took Joseph's coat, they killed a goat, dipped the coat in the blood, and they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, This have we found, know now whether it be thy son's coat or not. And he knew it. The father knew it and said, It's my son's coat. An evil beast has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces, and Jacob rent his clothes, put sackcloth upon his loins, mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, For I will go down unto my grave, unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and a captain of the guard. So notice, not only does deception lead more deception, deception always leads to suffering of others. Always. When you lie to your family, when you lie to your father, when you lie to your brothers or sisters, it leads to more deception, but it leads to their suffering. And that's exactly what's happening in this passage, is that these brothers have conspired in their minds to turn against, become apathetic towards their brother, where they don't care how it affects everybody else. They don't care what it does to their father. All they know is they hate Joseph, get rid of him so we can get stuff. They then turn on their own brother Reuben, and now they've even turned on their own father. That they're going to take the coat of many colors, they're going to kill an animal, they're going to wrap it in blood, they're going to say, your son has been rent to shreds by some wild animal. But Jacob begins to mourn. He says, I will even mourn. This will be my death, the mourning of my son Joseph. So here's the question. What do you do when you don't know what to do in this certain situation? Where your hatred and envy within your heart you've had violent thoughts, that you've conspired and become apathetic. You've become a deceiver in the sense that you've led to more deception, and in a sense you have led more suffering within your family. What do you do when you don't know what to do? Well, here is the answer. Go to chapter 39 and look down in verse 2. And I want you to look at the first 5 words in that. And it says, "And the Lord was with Joseph." So I don't care if you're the victim or the guilty. In other words, I don't care if you're the one receiving that treatment or the one giving that treatment. It's the same application for you. God is with you. So if you're the one receiving that type of treatment, where you're receiving kind of violence with the whole conspiracy and apathy, you're the one receiving the deception that leads to more deceptions and more of your suffering, understand God knows what's going on. Understand that God is with you. If you're the one doing all those things, God's watching. God knows exactly what you're doing. And if we call ourselves believers, understand that there is punishment for your sin. But know this. All of us, in a sense, are deceivers. If you're watching this video and you think to yourself, man, what kind of people is this? What kind of story did you just share with me? Understand, at your core of your heart, you're the same person. And at the core heart, you have sin. And at the core of that, you need Jesus. So my prayer is that you just accept the fact of who you are. That you are that conspiracy type of person, that you are apathetic, that you can lead to more deception, and that you can lead to other people suffering because you're a sinner. And what we believe as Christians is this: you need Jesus Christ to overcome all that. So guys, I love you. I care about you. I cannot wait to meet you in person. But until then, let's be careful. Let's be careful not to hold hatred and envy within our hearts. Thank you guys for tuning in.